Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. You ready to get a little weird today?
Oh, yeah. Always up for some weirdness. What are we looking at this time?
Well, we're going to be diving into a case that's a little bit creepy, a little bit funny, and a whole lot of strange. It's the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion.
Wow, okay, I remember hearing about that one, but it was one of those things where I never really looked into the details.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was too. But it's one of those stories that the more you dig into it, the weirder it gets.
hmm
So we're going to try to unpack it all here, break it down, and hopefully get a little closer to understanding just what the heck happened.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, we
Yeah.
got to set the stage. It's 1987.
Ah, okay. Big hair, shoulder pads, synthesizers, the works.
You got it.
Yeah.
Now imagine you're in Chicago,
Okay. Windy City deep dish pizza.
and you're settling in for a night of TV.
Ah, the good old days before streaming services and binge watching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a simpler time.
Mhm.
You've got your snacks, your comfy chair, and you're ready for some good old-fashioned entertainment.
So what are we watching?
Well, on WGN-TV Channel 9, they're showing a sports segment. All right, Bears game, Bulls game, Cubs game. What is it?
I don't remember the specifics, but in the middle of the broadcast, something really strange happens. The screen goes black.
Oh, no. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Always a bummer.
And then a few seconds later, it comes back on, but instead of the sportscaster, there's this bizarre figure wearing a Max Headroom mask.
Wait a minute. Max Headroom.
Ugh.
Like the 80s computer-generated talking head?
The one and only. This figure is just swaying back and forth in front of this weird, like, rotating corrugated metal background.
That's already super creepy.
And then you hear this distorted robotic voice, kind of like Max Headroom, but way more distorted and unsettling.
Oh, wow. This is starting to sound like something out of a horror movie.
It really is. And this whole thing only lasts for about 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And it cuts back to the sportscaster like nothing happened.
I bet people were freaking out.
Oh, absolutely. It was like nothing anyone had ever seen before.
So wait, was that the only time it happened? Was that the whole intrusion?
Actually, that was just the first one. Later that same night, it happened again. But this time, it was during an episode of Doctor Who on WTTW Channel 11.
Doctor Who. Now that's a show that knows a thing or two about strange happenings.
Right. So picture this. You're watching Doctor Who. It's late at night, probably getting pretty engrossed in the story when suddenly, bam, the screen goes black again.
Here we go again.
But this time when it comes back on, it's the Max Headroom figure again. Same mask, same weird background.
But I'm guessing this time it lasted longer than 20 seconds.
You got it. This time it went on for about 90 seconds.
90 seconds. That's a long time to be broadcasting something that bizarre.
And it wasn't just the visuals. This time the audio was even more distorted, and the figure was making these strange statements and references.
What kind of things were they saying?
Well, some of it was gibberish, but there were some phrases that stood out. Like there was a point where they said, "Catch the wave," which was a reference to a Coke commercial that Max Headroom was in.
Oh, wow. So they were really trying to channel Max Headroom here.
Yeah, it wasn't just a random person in a mask. This was someone who knew about Max Headroom and was deliberately using that imagery.
This is getting weirder by the minute.
And it gets even creepier.
Yeah.
They also made references to things like the Chicago Cubs and local newscasters.
Okay, so definitely someone with knowledge of Chicago and its media scene.
Absolutely. And then there was this really bizarre part where they started humming the theme song from Clutch Cargo, which was this old animated show.
Clutch Cargo. Now, that's a deep cut. I haven't heard that name in years.
Right. It's super random, and the whole time there's this unsettling laughter in the background.
Like a distorted evil laugh.
Pretty much. And then after about 90 seconds of this, the screen went black again, and it cut back to Doctor Who like nothing had happened.
Okay, but at this point, someone must have known something was up. Right? This couldn't have just been brushed off as a technical glitch.
You'd think so. But remember, this is 1987. The internet as we know it didn't exist. Digital forensics was in its infancy.
So trying to track down the source of this intrusion must have been incredibly difficult.
It was a nightmare. The FCC got involved, the police were investigating, engineers were trying to figure out how it was even possible, but it was like chasing a ghost.
So they never found out who did it.
Nope. To this day, the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion remains unsolved.
Wow. I knew it was a strange case, but I had no idea it was still a complete mystery.
That's the thing about this case. It's not just a weird event from the past. It's a mystery that continues to baffle people to this day.
So how is it even possible to do something like that in the first place?
Yeah.
To interrupt a live broadcast like that? What kind of technical skills are we talking about here?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, because to pull this off, you would need some serious technical know-how and specialized equipment.
I can only imagine. Like, what would you even need to hijack a broadcast signal?
Well, you'd need a way to override the station signal, which means you'd probably need something like a satellite uplink.
Okay, so not exactly something you can just pick up at the local electronics store.
Definitely not. And then you'd need to create the video and audio content, which means you'd need some pretty sophisticated editing equipment.
And don't forget the Max Headroom mask and that bizarre rotating background.
Right. It's like this whole production was planned out and executed with a level of detail that's just mind-boggling.
Especially for 1987. I mean, this was way before everyone had computers and video editing software at home.
Exactly. This was a time when you had to really know what you were doing to pull something like this off.
So who do you think could have done this? I mean, what kind of person has the skills, the equipment, and the motivation to do something like this?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Over the years, there have been tons of theories, but no one knows for sure who was behind the mask.
All right, well, let's hear those theories then. What are the leading contenders in the Max Headroom mystery?
Buckle up, because it's about to get even weirder.
So let's dive into those theories then. Who are the usual suspects in a case like this?
Well, one of the most popular theories is that it was a disgruntled employee, someone who had a grudge against WGN or WTTW and wanted to get revenge.
Yeah, that makes sense. It would explain how they had the technical knowledge to pull it off.
Exactly. And there were rumors at the time about some technicians who had been fired or laid off right before the intrusion.
That's definitely suspicious.
But even if they had the knowledge, would they have had access to the equipment? Like, where would you even get a satellite uplink in 1987?
Well, that's one of the holes in this theory. There's no evidence that any of the disgruntled employees had access to that kind of equipment.
So maybe it wasn't a lone wolf. Maybe it was a group effort.
That's another possibility. Some people believe it was a prank by a group of tech-savvy college students or maybe even a hackers collective.
Like some kind of underground group of media pranksters.
Exactly. They could have pooled their resources and knowledge to pull off this elaborate stunt.
And they probably thought it was hilarious.
Oh, I'm sure they did. But of course, there's no evidence to support this theory either. So no disgruntled employees, no pranksters. What else is there?
Well, there's always a possibility that it was just some random lone wolf, someone with a lot of time on their hands, a deep understanding of broadcasting technology, and a really twisted sense of humor.
Okay, now that's a little creepy. The idea of someone out there with that kind of knowledge and the ability to just disrupt a major broadcast signal like that.
It's definitely unsettling. And it plays into this idea that anyone could be behind the mask, that we're all just one step away from someone messing with our reality.
Yeah, I can see how that would tap into people's anxieties, especially back in the 80s when technology was advancing so rapidly. People were already starting to worry about things like computers taking over the world and artificial intelligence running amok.
Right. It was like this incident gave those fears a face, a very creepy, distorted face.
So is there any theory that you find more convincing than the others, or are we just left with a bunch of unanswered questions?
Honestly, I think all the theories have their strengths and weaknesses. It's one of those cases where you can find evidence to support almost any conclusion you want to draw.
So it really is a mystery for the ages.
It is. But you know, even though we may never know for sure who was behind the Max Headroom intrusion, I think there are still some important things we can learn from this incident.
Like what can we take away from a 30-year-old unsolved mystery?
Well, for one thing, I think it reminds us of the power of the unknown. How something as simple as a distorted image and a creepy voice can capture our imaginations and haunt us for decades.
It's like a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah,
A reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
exactly. And I think it also speaks to our fascination with technology and its potential for both good and evil.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, technology can connect us, inform us, entertain us. But on the other hand, it can be used to manipulate us, control us, and even harm us.
It's a double-edged sword. And the Max Headroom intrusion is a perfect example of how technology can be used to disrupt our sense of reality and make us question everything we see and hear.
It's like a warning from the past, a reminder that we need to be critical thinkers and not just blindly accept everything we're told or shown.
Exactly. We need to be aware of the potential for manipulation and be willing to question the source of our information.
Especially in today's world where we're bombarded with information from all sides, it's more important than ever to be discerning and to think critically about what we're consuming.
Absolutely. The Max Headroom intrusion may be a mystery from the past, but its lessons are still relevant today.
So what do you think? Is there anything else we can learn from this case, or are we ready to move on to something a little less creepy?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here, but before we move on, I want to touch on one more thing that I find really fascinating about this whole incident.
Okay, with that.
The fact that it happened in 1987
Mm.
At a time when the internet, as we know it, didn't exist, social media didn't exist, the world was a very different place.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a time before the internet now. It feels like it's always been there.
Right. But back then, the idea of someone hacking into a broadcast signal and disrupting a major TV network, it was almost unthinkable.
Like something out of a science fiction movie.
Exactly. And yet it happened. And I think it's interesting to consider how this incident might have played out differently if it had happened today in our hyper-connected digital world.
That's a good point. I mean, imagine if something like this happened now, it would be all over social media within minutes. There would be memes and hashtags and conspiracy theories galore.
Exactly. It would be a global phenomenon. And I wonder if that kind of instant widespread attention would have helped or hindered the investigation.
That's a tough one. On the one hand, more attention could leads more tips, more people coming forward with information. But on the other hand, it could also create a lot of noise and make it harder to separate fact from fiction.
That's true. And then there's the question of how the perpetrators themselves would have used social media. Would they have tried to claim credit for the intrusion? Would they have used it to spread their message even further?
It's fascinating to think about all the different ways this incident could have unfolded in today's digital landscape.
Yeah, it's like a thought experiment, taking a historical event and imagining how it would play out in a different context.
And I think it highlights how much the world has changed in the past few decades, how technology has transformed the way we communicate, the way we consume information, the way we experience reality itself.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder what other events from the past might look completely different if they happened today.
That's a great question. And I think it's a reminder that history is never truly static. It's always being reinterpreted and recontextualized in light of new information and new perspectives.
So even though the Max Headroom intrusion happened over 30 years ago, it's still a relevant and thought-provoking case that can teach us a lot about the world we live in today.
Agreed. And I think it's a good reminder that even in our digital age, there are still mysteries out there that may never be fully solved.
You know, it's amazing to me how one incident from the 80s can still feel so relevant today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it. This was way before the internet, before social media, before the whole world was connected 24/7.
Right. It was a different era. But the themes of the Max Headroom intrusion, the disruption, the manipulation, the anonymity, it all feels so connected to the challenges we face in the digital age.
Yeah, it's like this incident was a glimpse into the future, a warning of what was to come.
And it makes you wonder if the people behind it knew just how much their actions would resonate decades later.
Maybe they were just a bunch of pranksters looking for a laugh. Or maybe they were social commentators trying to make a statement about the power of media.
Or maybe there was something else entirely, something we haven't even considered.
That's the beauty of a good mystery. It leaves you with more questions than answers.
And it forces you to think critically, to question your assumptions, to look beyond the surface.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most important lessons we can take away from the Max Headroom intrusion. The need to be skeptical, to be discerning, to be aware of the potential for manipulation in all its forms.
Especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with information from all directions.
Right. It's like we're living in an information war zone. And we need to be armed with the tools of critical thinking to navigate it effectively.
So what are some of those tools? What can we do to be more mindful consumers of information?
Well, first and foremost, we need to be aware of our own biases.
Yeah,
We all have them, and they can influence how we interpret information.
that's true. We tend to gravitate towards information that confirms our existing beliefs and dismiss information that challenges them.
Exactly. So it's important to step outside of our echo chambers and expose ourselves to different perspectives, even if those perspectives make us uncomfortable.
And we need to be critical of the sources of our information. Just because something is shared on social media or printed in a newspaper doesn't mean it's true.
Right. We need to look at the source's reputation, their track record, their potential motives, and we need to be wary of anything that seems too sensational or too good to be true.
Because chances are it probably is.
Exactly. And if something makes you question your reality, if it makes you wonder if you're being manipulated, that's a good sign that you need to dig deeper. Do your own research.
Yeah.
Talk to experts. Don't just take things at face value.
So in a way, the Max Headroom intrusion can serve as a reminder to be vigilant, to be aware of the potential for deception, to not be afraid to question what we see and hear.
Absolutely. And I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone living in the digital age.
So what do you think? Is there anything else we can learn from this case? Or is it time to finally put the Max Headroom mystery to rest?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the incident, the theories, the cultural impact. the lessons for today.
We've talked about everything from satellite uplinks to deepfakes to the very nature of truth in the digital age.
And we've come to the conclusion that the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion remains one of the most fascinating and baffling unsolved mysteries of our time.
A mystery that continues to capture our imaginations and remind us of the strange and wonderful and sometimes unsettling possibilities of technology.
And who knows, maybe one day the truth will come out. Maybe someone will confess or some new evidence will surface.
But until then, the mystery lives on, a reminder that even in our age of information overload, there are still secrets out there waiting to be uncovered.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion. We hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did.
And we encourage you to continue exploring this case and other mysteries that pique your curiosity, because the more we question, the more we learn, and the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of our world.
So until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep an eye out for the unexpected.
Because you never know when you might stumble upon the next great mystery.